We are in 1 Samuel chapter 18 and reading verses 1 to 14 together. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow and his belt. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs and with tambourines and lyres. As they danced, they sang, "Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands." Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, "I'll pin David to the wall." But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul. So he sent David away from him, and gave him command over 1,000 men. And David led the troops in their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success, because the Lord was with him.
We're looking at the life of David. David was the king of Israel, and there's more written about David and his life than anyone else other than Jesus, both in the Bible but also in ancient literature. But that's not where I want to begin. My wife found this article last night in a mad panic as I was looking for an illustration, and it's a good one. So full credit to her. When did envy become okay? Wrote Carol Murkowski in 2014. She says, "When did envy become okay? I'm constantly hearing or seeing not very guilty admissions of being jealous of a friend for, say, something seen on Instagram. Whether it's the eye roll, the slow eye roll of a friend's exotic trip, snarking on someone's great seats at a ball game, let's just say football game, or commenting about an acquaintance's restaurant every night life. Jealousy is in. Have we become a culture of green-eyed monsters who, in the parlance of hip-hop, hate on our friends and acquaintances for all they have, and we don't? Maybe it's social media. Study after study shows that our jealousy spikes when our use of social sharing sites increases. New York Post, 2014, 11 years ago, she's writing that. It's bang up to date, and it's not a new issue. When did envy become okay? Now, that's the subject of this passage. That's the subject of this passage this morning. David, in his life, is being exalted by the Lord, and Saul, in his life, having removed his spirit from him a few chapters ago that we saw, he's in a descent, he's in a decay. If he was a garment as a person, he would be fraying at the edges and at his very core. Envy is destructive. Envy and jealousy are close bedfellows, but they are slightly different, as we're going to explore. Envy can start small, but it can grow into a monster. It can consume you. It can and will destroy you. I want us to look at this interesting topic. I mean, people come and talk to me because of my role as a pastor, and they say, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with greed. I'm struggling with my use of money. I'm struggling with my use of the internet and purity. Not one person has ever come and said, I'm really struggling with the envy. Is there something you could do to help me? Where should I look? And I wonder what that shows. I think it shows that there is a whole gamut of respectable sins. To quote Jerry Bridges from a book a long time ago, envy is not one of them. Envy is something you call a nightclub. It's not something very serious. The Bible says it is very serious. In fact, it's deadly. And so we're going to look at that this morning from the life of Saul and David. What is it? What does it lead to? And is there a path to freedom? Okay. What is it? What it leads to? And is there a path of freedom? Number one, envy. What is it? Verse 7 to verse 9. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul was struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry. And this saying displeased him. And he said, they've ascribed to David 10,000s and to me they've ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Right off the bat, two things that we learn about envy. Envy. We need to be aware of them. First of all, this is what we see in Saul's heart from those sentences, verse 7 to verse 9 of 1 Samuel 18. At its heart, envy, rather the fuel for envy, is comparison. It's comparison. It's comparison when you envy someone because it has in its core the inability for you to celebrate or enjoy success that you see in someone else. Look at verse 8. Here's the key. He, but me. Look at verse 8. He has 10,000. I only have 1,000. He, but me. That's the comparison from the lyrics of this song that these women are singing as Saul and David return. Saul can't just say, I'm so pleased for David. David just walked towards me at the end of chapter 17 with Saul's head in his hand. Do you notice that? Didn't read that out for sensitive children, but we'll just mention it now. Verse 57 of chapter 17. As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, that's shorthand for Goliath, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. We don't know if it smelt pretty rotten. We don't know if the blood was still dripping from the arteries, but there it was. Massive head in the hand of a 17-year-old boy before the king. Here's evidence of what I've just done. You would have thought there'd be some iota, some small part of gratitude in the heart of Saul for David, who's just defeated this monster that Saul did not have the courage to engage with, and he himself was a giant fighting the other giant of the Philistines. But none of it. Look at what he says, verse 7, verse 8, verse 9. He, but I. It's so childlike. That's not fair. Why are they not praising my name? Why are they shouting praise to him? Friends, the first sign of envy in your spirit is that you cannot appreciate something good that someone else has. If you're a woman, you cannot appreciate the beauty of another woman. If you are happy about something, but someone else is happier, you cannot appreciate the reason and the source of their happiness. You cannot appreciate success in someone else professionally, personally, relationally, financially, whatever way, illy, without thinking about yourself. Envy makes everything about you. If it were a camera on your phone, envy would be the forward-facing one because you are the center of the universe. It's about comparison. Here's the second thing. Notice the motivating power that drives envy. What is at the very center of envy? What's the fuel for it and what's the fruit of it? Verse 8. And Saul was very angry. Saul was very angry. Here's the flow of this unit of thought. Verse 6. Saul hears the victory celebration. He hears the word of the song that is being sung. That's in verse 7. And I'm sure he would be thinking, that praise should be to me. I'm the king. Why are they not praising me? So here is Saul, and he's lamenting the loss of self-glory that he longs for. I'm the king. This praise should be mine. And so verse 8, it produces in him, that we see 3 times in this chapter, this very great anger. This very great anger. So let's think about the difference between jealousy and envy. Jealousy is comparative. I want what you have. Envy takes jealousy one step further. I want what you have. And if I cannot have what you have, then neither will you. I like your car better than mine. And if I can't have what you have, that car, I'm going to key it. I'm going to damage it. I'm going to mar it. You see it in relationships. You see it in professional settings. You see it in the workplace. So comparison kills. Comparison kills contentment. Anger extinguishes joy. That's why it's so different from the other, let's say, 7 deadly sins, but there are many more. You can compare what you have to someone who has more, therefore you don't enjoy what you have. That's at the heart of jealousy. This text is showing us that you can even be envious of yourself, actually. You can say, I used to be like this, but I don't have this anymore. I used to look like this, and now the mirror tells a different story. So I cannot enjoy my stage of life anymore because I just want to go back. Now we need to take care. It's possible to want something that someone else has and it not be envious and it not be negative. There is such a thing as holy jealousy in a good way. Jesus in the Gospels is jealous for the glory of his Father. So when he goes to the temple and sees that worship has been replaced by trade, he turns over the tables, saying this is wrong. That's a holy jealousy for the glory of his Father. Maybe you've read the Gospels yourself and you're falling more and more in love with Jesus Christ and his character. You see him as more and more delightful and beautiful. And you say, I wish I was that wise. I wish I was that gentle. I wish my speech was that controlled. It's a holy jealousy. That's a good thing. That's not what we're being shown here in 1 Samuel chapter 18. 200 years ago, there's a preacher, a Christian minister called Jonathan Edwards. He's on the screen. He wrote a sermon that's fascinating and also very long. At one point, he says, never underestimate the power of envy. And he gives 2 examples. He says, think about the devil. Think about Lucifer. Think about Satan. All names for the same power. He was in heaven. He is a created being underneath God's divine authority. But he had a thought to himself. I'm number 2. I wish I could be number 1. Envy made it impossible for Satan to enjoy heaven. I mean, he had a thought saying, I think I deserve to be number 1. I'm going to get God off his powerful perch, his powerful throne. That's where I should be. That's where I deserve to be. And if I can't have it, neither can he. Think of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden, paradise, perfection, beauty, satisfaction, delight, all those sorts of words. Nothing imperfect, no sickness, no tiredness, no death, no decay. It's the Garden of Eden. What ruined the Garden of Eden for them? It was this envy. I bet you that's the best tree. I know God says that's the tree I can't enjoy fruit from, but I bet that's better than all those others. There's thousands of others. I bet that's the one. I bet that God is a spoilsport and he believed the lie from Satan, the envious one. Envy is that powerful. Envy can make the Garden of Eden and its perfection not enough for our hearts. It can make heaven not enough. Envy is what made the devil demonic, says Jonathan Edwards. Envy is what ruined the universe. So don't underestimate the power of envy. It's deadly. It's serious. It has a power. At its heart is comparison. It's one step beyond from jealousy. If I can't have that thing that I delight in, that you're enjoying, then neither can you have it as well. That's envy. But what does it lead to? Second point, envy. What is it? Number 1, what does it lead to? This is the second point. Notice the spiral down after the song, 7, 8, and 9. Look down to verse 10 and 11. From that day on, murderous envy takes over Saul. The next day, a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul. He was prophesying within his house while David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, And Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David evaded him twice. Now, there is a lot going on here in those few sentences. Here's a summary. Envy brings slavery. Envy brings slavery, but slavery also brings envy. What's going on with this harmful spirit thing? This word harmful is a pretty helpful translation, but it's a word that means terrifying. It's a word that means terrifying. You have to ask yourself a question. We already know that Saul is scared of David. So why would there need to be a spirit of fear, a harmful spirit? Look down verse 12, verse 15, verse 29. It says afraid, very afraid, afraid. Saul is afraid of David as his star is on the rise. In Judges chapter 9, we read the same phrase of this harmful spirit. In Judges 9, it's the story of Abimelech and the men of Shechem. They're fighting. They start to hate each other. They're doing hateful things towards each other. And then Judges 9, verse 23 says this: God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. So you're thinking, hang on. There's already a spirit of hate between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. So why do we need the spirit of hate? And in this passage, in 1 Samuel 18, there's already a spirit of fear because Saul is envious of what David has. What's the spirit coming for? I'll try and be brief. What I believe this text to be saying is this: the more you give into anger, the more you give into envy. The more you give into greed, you put yourself in touch with the supernatural forces of evil outside of yourself until you get locked in to that obsessionally. Because God honors free will, it's with his permission. So you have free will to choose something, and then God, in his sovereignty, confirms that. I think that's what the passage is saying. Here are two ways to understand your heart. One of the ways to understand what you really worship, what your heart looks to for real security and to make meaning, is to think about what keeps you up at night. We've said that many times before. What's your greatest nightmares? What's your most horrific experience that causes you sleepless nights? That reveals what your heart values most preciously. Here's another way. Stink eye, I think that lady is giving someone. Here's another way for you to understand your spirit. Look at what the things you most begrudge other people. What do you most begrudge someone else? What do you think they don't deserve that? Who comes into your mind's eye when you think about an answer to that question? They don't deserve that as much as me. That's another way for you to look at how your heart is functioning towards security and identity and values. Look at your envies, because envy doesn't just lead to slavery. Envy reveals something that is already driving you towards sinful patterns of behavior. What is it in this passage? Verse 8. In Saul's case, it was the kingship. All this praise, all this singing, all this glad handing, all this ticker-tape parade, that should be mine. I'm king. What else is he going to take? The kingdom? That's all that he's got left to take. You can see that from verse 8. If you were to read on chapters 18, chapters 19, chapters 20, Saul becomes obsessive about David. He's becoming disordered. He's coming apart at the seams in his heart, and his priorities are truly revealed. What can I do to defend my kingdom? So he gets his hand on the spear and he throws it. When it says, thinking he might pin him against the wall, it's not, as I thought at the start of the week, one of those tricks that you see at the circus. Hey, can someone be a volunteer? And you kind of stand on one of those wheels and someone throws daggers at you and it pins you with your clothing and you still rotate. No, this is shorthand for saying Saul wanted to throw a spear at his head. He wanted to take him out. He wanted to murder him. He wanted to take his life. Verse 10 and 11, it begins quite subtly. It's a covert operation. His hand is on the spear at all times, looking for his opportunity. Look down to verse 17 of chapter 18. Now it gets a little bit less subtle. He sends him out, hoping he'll do battle and get killed. Quote, I will not raise my hand against him. Let the Philistines do that. Later on in the chapter, verse 25, he said, hey, you can have my daughter. Saul says to David, you can have my daughter, but there's one catch. I want 100 foreskins from the Philistines. What's he hoping David's going to happen? He's hoping that David's going to get taken out, not by his own hand on the spear from Saul, but the Philistines will do it. Over in chapter 20, verse 33, he's so unraveling that now he's going to throw a spear at his own son, Jonathan. So the spirit of fear that's come upon Saul is reacting very strongly to the presence of the Lord's anointed and the purposes of God. And he's saying, I want to take him out. I want to do to David what I should have done to Goliath. And I want to take off his head. Near the end, as he starts to fray, Saul says, I don't care who knows it. I'm going to go after him myself. Let's have a manhunt. Let's take Saul out. Why was it covert to start off with? Well, look, the main thing in Saul's life is his kingship. That's his hope. That's what he enviously wants to protect. That's what makes him feel who he is. And he's starting to lose hold of the kingship because of David's popularity. Saul's killed his thousands. David has killed 10,000 and so on. Friends, anything that is more important to your heart than God, anything that's more important to your life than God, can be like a drug. A drug that gives you a high, but in the end will actually destroy you. The drug of significance, but actually it begins to control you. And then you can build your whole life upon it and your whole self-understanding upon it. But the problem is if you live for a drug like that, it will destroy you. It leads you to slavery and you will unravel because of it. Think if the most important thing in your life is your spouse. I love my husband, I love my wife more than anyone else, even more than God. If you behave like that, if you become emotionally dependent on any person, that could drive the person away. You become so dependent, so infatuated, so linked to that person that actually they become to draw back from you because it's too much. If you built your entire life on anything such as your children, you will live your life out through your children. It will result in control. It will result in domineering behavior that you either over or under parent, as we said before. You do everything you can, and ultimately you'll push them away, although you love them the most. Envy, you see, is not just the way to slavery. Envy reveals what's in our heart as the core issue from where we get our identity, and it can be like a drug to your spiritual soul. It's the root of all our problems. If it's that serious, is there any hope for us? If it's that deadly, is there any antidote for the drug of envy and its power upon us? Well, this chapter says, yes, there is. There is a way to freedom. If you understand envy and what it is, its seriousness, if you understand what it can produce, then there's also hope at the beginning of the chapter in the first 4 sentences. How do you get freedom from the tyranny, from the drug, from the bondage, from the slavery, and the danger of envy? Let's look at the first 4 sentences. Here's the way to freedom in the life of Jonathan that Daniel prayed about. Verse 1. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, so that's David with Goliath's head in his hand. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. Next week, we're thinking about the theme of friendship that is so evident in David and Jonathan's life together. But here before you are 2 people who see the same event and respond completely differently. One is Saul, the other is Jonathan. They've both seen God's anointed. They've both seen David, and they're both looking at the future and making two very different conclusions about their role in it. Here is David, the king-elect, the king of Israel, elect. They've both got a lot to lose. You've got the current King Saul, and you've got the one whose hand is on the throne already, Saul's son Jonathan. In fact, if anything, Jonathan has got more to lose than Saul, because he's next in line to the throne. But here's the two responses. Saul opposes what God is doing in the life of David, and Jonathan embraces it and responds. Did you notice that? If you were a prince and if you were the king-elect, your robe represented your status. If you abdicated the throne in the ancient Near East, you would take your robe off and you'd put it on the throne to say the next person can take that on because I'm done with it. Verse 4. When Jonathan takes off his robe, he's actually transferring his loyalty, his kingly credentials to David. But along with his robe, he also gives his tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. When someone gave you their sword with the hilt first, presenting it to you, immediately they're putting themselves in mortal danger, because you could take that sword from the hilt and you could strike them down immediately. They could kill you with one radically quick stroke. They could do anything they wanted to you. You're saying, I give you my sword so that I put myself under your authority. I give you my sword because I want to serve you. I recognize something in you. Now, why would Jonathan do this? He was chicken. Jonathan was chicken. He never wanted to be king. So he was saying something like, I'd like to do it, but after you. No, says David. No, it's nothing like that. But he was a chicken. Well, no, he's not a chicken. He's not a coward. He's not a weakling. He's just not trying to avoid the pressure of it. He's not trying to be kind in that sense. If you go back to chapter 14 of 1 Samuel 14, we see Jonathan, and he's heroic. He's noble. He pretty much wins a battle single-handedly. So that's not what's going on here. Why did Jonathan step aside and give all the vestiture of royalty to David? By faith, Jonathan looks at David, and I think he might say something like this to himself. I perceive God's salvation is coming, and the only way I can participate in it is to get off the throne. So that's what I'm going to do. I think he says something like that. Look carefully from the life of Jonathan, and we can get 3 applications about how we respond to the temptation of envy and how we can get free from it to celebrate what God is doing in other people's lives. Here are the 3. Number 1, look at Jonathan in verses 1 to 4, because Jonathan shows us the attitude we should have towards one another. Okay? The attitude we should have towards one another. When you truly love someone, you put your happiness intimately, intrinsically intertwined into their happiness. Kids, parents, neighbors, good friends. You so love that person in your mind's eye that you want their joy, you want their prosperity, you want their success, you want them to come first, and you don't care if you become second. It's not a competition. It's certainly not a comparison. You want nothing else than that person in your mind's eye to be happy and prosperous. You love them. They know that you love them, and so that your joy is connected to their joy. Twice, verse 1, verse 3, we read this phrase, Jonathan loved David as his own soul. He loved David as himself. There's an interconnectedness in God's economy between these two men. It must mean at least this. We'll think about more next week. If you love someone as yourself, it means that you are not one bit less happy when they prosper than if you prosper. When they mature and you mature. When they have success or if you had it yourself. So death to comparison, and yes to joy and happiness when the other person succeeds. We see that in Jonathan putting David first rather than himself. There's something else we see in Jonathan's attitude secondarily, which is Jesus' attitude towards you. We see Jesus' attitudes towards you and me. Look at Jonathan. He's taken off his sword, his tunic, his robe. He's making himself really vulnerable, giving his sword to David. And then we look further down the timeline of salvation history, and we see another Jonathan. We see a greater Jonathan. We see the ultimate Jonathan. We see someone else who had the rights to the crown, someone else who had the rights to the throne of the entire cosmos. But the only way he could truly love those who he chose to love was if he got off the throne. But here's the difference. Philippians chapter 2 says this: Jesus Christ was equal with God. He shared the throne of the universe with his Father. And Jesus emptied himself. He became vulnerable. He became killable. And he didn't just present his sword to an opponent. He experienced the sword in his own heart. He was killed upon a cross. And if you're new to Christianity, you should be saying, why? Why did he do that? In John 17, we have the high priestly prayer of Jesus the night before he goes to the cross to die for the sins of the world. And he's talking through prayer with his Father. It's very intimate and very revealing. His disciples are listening in. His Father is being communed with Jesus as he prays. And Jesus says something like this: Father, I've stripped myself of the glory I deserve so that they, my disciples, throughout all of history, can have the glory they don't deserve. It's the exact opposite of envy. It's benevolence, generosity, it's kindness, it's mercy, it's grace to the max. Friends, here's freedom. Here's how you can be changed. You have to look at Jesus, your ultimate friend, your ultimate Jonathan, from heaven, who didn't just pay our debt. The only way for us to receive what he wanted to give us, to sit on his throne, was if he was willing to lose it. And he did. That's what we're going to come around the table and celebrate. When you see the depths, the height, the greatness of God's grace to us in Jesus, that has the power to change your heart. It has the power to change the way you look at other people. I don't need to compete against you. I want your success. I want you to know Jesus. I want to give you life. I want to point away from myself because no longer is it comparative. No longer is it competition. I have an identity that I can never lose. And so I know who I am. It has power, the gospel, to free you from the destructive power of envy, like nothing else can. Last of all, third application, we see in Jonathan and how he behaves with David, the attitude we ought to have to Jesus as a vertical application. The attitude we ought to have to Jesus. Jonathan says to David, I see God's salvation coming through you. And the only way for me to experience that, to get that into my life, is for me to get off the throne. And so he did. Friends, do you know what it means to be a Christian? You need to do with Jesus, I say that respectfully, what Jonathan did with David. You need to get off the throne of your life, and you need to hand authority for your life into the safe, big hands of Jesus. Jonathan had the Lord's anointed before him, and by faith and the power of the Holy Spirit, he saw the future of God's kingdom, and he got out of the way. You have to look at God's anointed, who's not David, it's the greater David, it's Jesus. And you have to say, I see God's salvation coming. But if it's going to get into my life, I need to get off the throne of my life because it's not what belongs to me. I can't just believe in a historical person called Jesus Christ. I have to get you in my life. And that means coming under your authority. My question to you is simply, have you done that? On the screen, you've got an image that you've seen before, which is for Alpha. We continue on Wednesday nights. If you were not able to get on this first week, that's absolutely fine. You've not missed a great deal. But please come this week. if you'd like to, if it's helpful to you, if you've got a friend who would appreciate it. Because this week we're looking at who is Jesus? It's a pretty important question. So if you're new to the Christian faith, if it's something you're exploring and thinking about, can I encourage you to come 7:30 on Wednesday out in the courtyard there. We'd love to meet you. Have you come under the loving authority of King Jesus? Have you seen the one to whom David points? And have you responded to him just like Jonathan did to David?